In the heart of a forgotten American neighborhood, where buildings stood like tired giants and streets whispered with hunger, lived a boy named Tafari. He was 10 years old, a quiet child with deep brown skin and eyes that held 1,000 stories. Tafari came from Africa, but he no longer remembered the sound of his mother's voice or the scent of home. He had been passed from hand to hand until finally, he was placed in a crumbling orphanage that smelled of damp floors and broken dreams. Other children played loudly. They laughed in corners, fought over bread, and ran through the rusted fences like shadows chasing time. But Tafari didn't run. He watched, he listened. His hands were always moving, not with mischief, but with purpose. He picked up pieces of the world others had thrown away. Bent spoons, bottle caps, torn wires, bits of cardboard. To most, it was trash. But to Tafari, it was magic. In the small patch of yard behind the orphanage, hidden beneath a dying tree, Tafari built things. His fingers shaped broken pieces into something whole. He had no books, no tools, no teacher. But inside his mind lived a universe where cars could drive with rubber bands, wings could flap with tin foil, and smiles could rise from nothing but wire and hope. That morning, as the fog lifted from the city like a tired blanket, Tafari placed his latest creation on the dusty ground. It was a small truck, built entirely from trash. The wheels were jar lids. The engine, a piece of coiled spring. He pushed it forward gently. It rolled, it turned, it moved like it had a soul. Across the park, standing near a food truck, a man in a long gray coat stopped mid-sip of his coffee. His name was Mr. Harold Grant. He was a toy company owner, once praised for his creativity, now drowning in fading ideas. His company was on the edge of collapse. Nothing inspired him anymore. But in that moment, he saw something move across the dirt, not just a toy, but a spark of forgotten wonder. He stepped closer, narrowing his eyes. The boy didn't see him. Tafari was too focused, too lost in the silent joy of seeing his creation come alive. Mr. Harold stayed hidden behind a tree, watching. He didn't speak. He didn't interrupt. He simply stared, as if he had discovered a treasure no one else had ever seen. But just as Tafari stood to reach for another piece of wire, a voice from inside the orphanage shouted. The moment shattered. The toy tipped over. Tafari grabbed it and ran, disappearing behind a wall of peeling paint and broken bricks. Mr. Harold blinked. The boy was gone. But the image stayed. The truck, the hands, the silence. Something had awakened inside him. And that night, as the rain tapped on glass windows across the city, the powerful toy maker sat in his office, sketching from memory, trying and failing to recreate the wonder he had seen from a distance. He didn't know the boy's name. He didn't know where he lived. But he knew one thing. He had to find him. The rain had passed, but the street still carried its sorrow. Puddles reflected the gray sky, and the wind whispered stories through alleyways and power lines. Mr. Harold Grant drove slowly, his expensive car out of place in a part of town where broken windows stared like blind eyes and the smell of smoke lingered in every corner. He didn't know where he was going. He didn't have a name. Just the memory of a toy built from trash, and the hands of a child who never looked up. But something in that moment haunted him. It wasn't the toy itself. It was the way the boy touched it, as if it mattered. As if it lived. He returned to the park, the same dirt, the same cracked benches. But the child wasn't there. For days, he came back, morning, afternoon, evening, each time he waited. Sometimes he sat. Sometimes he stood behind the tree, pretending to read a newspaper. But the boy never returned. What Mr. Harold didn't know was that behind a rusted chain-link fence, just past the tall weeds and graffiti-covered walls, the orphanage loomed like a forgotten prison. Inside, Tafari sat alone, his knees pulled To his chest, his toy truck hidden beneath a loose floorboard. The others had laughed at him when they saw it, called him foolish, told him it was useless. And when the head caretaker had found out, she took a stick to his back and warned him never to waste time on garbage again. But Tafari didn't cry. He never cried. He only waited for the night. When the others were asleep, he pulled the toy from hiding and held it like a secret. He whispered things to it, not words but feelings, as if the toy could hear his silence. That night, he sneaked out again. Through the broken window in the kitchen, over the fence where the wires had snapped. He tiptoed to the small park behind the old bakery, where he felt safe enough to dream. He didn't know that Mr. Harold was already there, hiding in the shadow of a tree. From a distance, the man watched again. The boy laid the truck down now, fitted with a small umbrella made of bottle caps. He placed pebbles in a line like a road and guided the truck along with a stick. His face was calm. His hands gentle. Mr. Harold's throat tightened. He stepped forward, one foot crunching a dry leaf. Tafari turned. Their eyes met for the first time, and just like that, Tafari ran. Faster than a shadow, he disappeared through the fence, back into the darkness. Mr. Harold stood still. His heart beat fast, like it hadn't in years. He hadn't come to scare the child. He had come with hope. But hope wasn't always welcomed by the ones who had learned to live without it. The next day, Mr. Harold returned with something different. Not money, not toys, but patience. He left a piece of blank paper and a pencil near the boy's path. Weighted down with a stone, on it he drew a simple sketch. A truck, just like the one Tafari had made. Beside it, a note written in gentle, careful words. He didn't sign it. He didn't need to. Later that night, Tafari found it. He stared at the sketch. Then folded it slowly and hid it in his pocket. Next to the only photo he had of his real family, something began to stir in his chest. Not trust. Not yet, but a question. Who had left this for him? And why did it feel like the beginning of something he never thought he deserved? The nights grew colder, but Tafari returned to the same patch of earth, where the wind didn't feel as cruel and the shadows didn't bite as hard. He brought with him scraps of plastic, broken buttons, and wire he had peeled from the back of an abandoned radio. Each time, he built something new. A bird that could flap, a robot that shuffled, a spinning top made from a bottle cap and pencil shavings. And each morning, he found another sketch. Another quiet message left under a stone, drawn by the same unknown hand. The sketches showed versions of his own creations, but better, smoother wheels, lighter frames, colors he had never dreamed of using. They were not commands. They were gifts. Silent encouragements, left by someone who saw him not as a poor orphan, but as a creator. Tafari never answered. He didn't know how. But he kept the sketches in a small tin box beneath his bed, hidden from the others. They became his treasure. The only thing in his world that didn't rot or vanish. Mr. Harold never tried to approach again. He only watched, learning from the boy's fingers, from the silence between them. Something in his chest began to heal. The company he once built, with fire and passion, had grown cold and mechanical. But watching this child build with nothing but imagination and broken tools reminded him why he had started it in the first place. Back at the orphanage, Tafari was changing. Not outside. His clothes were still torn, his shoes still cracked. But inside something was growing. Confidence, like a quiet flame. Purpose, like the weight of a name he had never been called. One afternoon, he built something different. It was not a truck or a plane. It was a person, a tiny figure made of wires, with a head from a broken bulb and arms from toothpicks. He placed it beside the note he had received the night before, and stared at it for a long time. That evening, Mr. Harold came as usual. He saw the figure, small, fragile, delicately balanced beside his latest sketch. He knelt down and smiled. Not with his mouth, but with his eyes. The boy had answered him, without words, without names, but with something more powerful. Trust. The next day, Mr. Harold returned with a worn notebook, its pages filled with blank squares. On the first page, he sketched a new toy, a kite shaped like a bird with wings that could fold. He placed it under the stone and left. When Tafari arrived, he opened the notebook slowly, then something inside him clicked. He could do this. He could dream bigger. Not just small toys for the dirt, but real ones. Toys that flew, that moved, that danced. And so for the first time, he sat with the notebook in his lap and began to sketch beside the man's lines, adding small ideas, little twists, his own style. The pencil trembled in his fingers, but he didn't stop. That night, Tafari didn't hide the notebook. He slept with it under his pillow. As if holding it would keep the darkness from taking everything away again. But deep within the city, not everyone was silent. Someone else had begun to notice the strange man visiting the park. A woman from the orphanage. Cold eyes. A bitter heart. She followed the tracks, saw the exchange of papers, and smelled what she hated most: hope. And when hope threatened her control, she prepared to crush it, even if it meant breaking the boy completely. The orphanage was a place of silence and routine. Obey, eat, obey, sleep, repeat. The children moved like shadows, hollow from years of being told they were nothing more than mouths to feed. But Tafari had changed. He moved differently now. Not faster, not louder, just with purpose. And in a place where purpose was forbidden, that alone made him dangerous. The woman who ran the orphanage, Miss Carver, noticed she had seen the spark before, in other children. Those who dared to imagine something better. She crushed them all, with harsh words, with isolation, with fear. Tafari would be no different. One evening, she followed him. He thought he was alone, slipping through the cracked window, holding the notebook close to his chest like a fragile dream. He ran down the alley, past the broken fence, to the quiet park where hope had started to bloom. But in the shadows, Miss Carver watched every step, her eyes narrow, her heart colder than the wind. She saw the man again, Mr. Harold, waiting in the distance, just watching, never speaking. Her jaw tightened. She saw the boy kneel in the dirt, open the notebook, and begin to draw. The next morning, Tafari's bed was empty. The children whispered. The window was nailed shut. The notebook was gone. In a cold room beneath the main hallway, Tafari sat on the floor, his arms wrapped around his knees, his back throbbing. Miss Carver had dragged him from his room before the sun rose. She tore the notebook from his hands and struck him with her wooden stick, over and over, not out of punishment, but out of hate. Hate for the light she saw growing inside him. She locked him in that room with no windows, no warmth, and no voice. At the same time, Mr. Harold arrived at the park, as he always did. But something was wrong. No toys in the dirt. No small footprints. No sign of life. He waited. 1 hour. 2, 3. Nothing. The next night, he came again, still nothing. But this time, he left something behind. Not a sketch, not a plan. Just a note. 4 words, scratched with trembling hands. I will find you. Meanwhile, beneath the floor of the orphanage, Tafari whispered to himself. Not words, just breaths. A way to remind his body it was still alive. But in the corner of the room, behind a loose stone, he found something. A broken spoon, a rubber band, a piece of wire. Even in darkness, Tafari's hands remembered who they were. Began to build. Not for fun, not for wonder, but to survive. Above him, Miss Carver burned the notebook. The pages curled. The sketches turned to ash. And with each flame, she believed she had won. But she didn't know. The boy was building again. This time he wasn't building a toy, he was building a way out. The cold room had no light, but Tafari's fingers knew their way. They had learned from dirt and dust, from wire and wood, from pain and silence. In the shadows he worked with scraps. The broken spoon became a lever, the rubber band a hinge. The wire a makeshift latch. Every piece had a purpose. Every move a risk. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. The fear was always there, like a second heartbeat. But Tafari had lived with fear all his life. It no longer ruled him. What kept him moving wasn't hope. It was defiance. He would not let the world forget him. Outside, Miss Carver paced the halls like a warden guarding secrets. She had told the others that Tafari was ill, resting, unfit for play. None of them believed her, but none dared speak. In that place, silence was survival. But one child, a boy with a limp named Elijah, had seen her burn the notebook. He had seen the fear in her face, and something inside. Elijah stirred. Because if someone like Tafari could be punished for dreaming. Maybe dreams were powerful after all. That night, while the orphanage creaked with sleep, Tafari placed the final piece of wire against the lock. The mechanism was crude, a thin rod that slid behind the bolt, connected to a piece of cloth tied around his wrist. With a slow pull, the latch gave a soft click. The door creaked open. He froze. No sound. He stepped out, his feet silent against the floor, through the narrow hallway. Past the kitchen with its leaking sink, he moved like a ghost, clinging to the walls, ducking under broken frames. He reached the window, the one they had nailed shut. But Tafari had planned for this. He pulled from his pocket a rusted nail and the spoon's sharp edge. Bit by bit, he pried the wood loose, pushing gently until the final nail gave way. The window opened. Air. Night. Freedom. He slipped outside, landing in the grass, knees scraping against stone. But he didn't stop. He ran, past the weeds, past the fence, past the world that tried to keep him small. To the park. To the place where it all began. But it was empty. No sketches. No footsteps. Only the wind. Tafari's chest tightened. Had he waited too long? Had the man given up? He dropped to his knees beside the tree, digging through the dirt with his hands, desperate to find something, anything. But there was nothing left. Until he saw it. A corner of paper sticking out beneath a rock, half covered by leaves. He pulled it free. It was wet, torn, but still there. 4 words. I will find you. Tafari clutched the paper to his chest, tears sliding down his cheeks for the first time in years. Not because he was afraid, but because someone was still looking. Behind him, in the distance, a car engine hummed. A pair of headlights turned into the narrow street, and a familiar shape stepped out. Mr. Harold. He had never stopped coming. He had waited, night after night, believing in a child he didn't even know. But just as he began to approach, another shadow emerged from the darkness. Miss Carver, her face pale, her voice rising. She had followed Tafari. She had come to take him back, and this time, she wasn't alone. The wind shifted as the two shadows faced each other across the empty park. One tall, stiff, wrapped in cold authority. The other, older, weary, but lit with quiet fire. Tafari stood between them, his chest heaving, torn between the past that had held him down and the future that now trembled before him. Miss Carver's eyes narrowed like knives. She stepped forward, her voice sharp with venom, pointing at Tafari like he was a stolen object. She spoke to Mr. Harold with a voice soaked in lies, accusations about trespassing, about stealing, about the boy being unstable, dangerous, unfit for society. Her words echoed across the park, but Mr. Harold didn't flinch. He had built empires from noise like that. He stepped in front of Tafari, shielding him without a word. His coat hung heavy, his hands clenched, but his eyes remained steady, locked on Miss Carver with a calm that terrified her more than rage ever could. Tafar. I looked up at him. No one had ever stood in front of him like that. No one had ever stood for him. Miss Carver shouted louder now. She called someone. Moments later, a dark van pulled up. Two uniformed men stepped out from the city's child services. She had prepared for this. She had told them the story. A lie wrapped in official language about a runaway boy, delusional. A threat to the others. The officers moved toward Tafari. He backed away. Mr. Harold reached into his coat and pulled out a file. He handed it to the officers. Inside, photographs, notes, sketches, proof of Tafari's creations, the notebook's burned remains, and records from private investigators who had quietly uncovered months of neglect inside the orphanage. The men read. They didn't speak. They looked at Tafari. Then at Miss Carver. Then one of them stepped forward and gently knelt beside the boy. He asked him nothing. He only held out his hand. Tafari didn't move. He stared at the man's hand like it was a trick, but Mr. Harold nodded, just once. Tafari stepped forward. The hand closed around his gently. Miss Carver's mouth opened, but no words came. She turned to the officers, furious, trembling, but it was too late. The walls she had built with silence were crumbling. Tafari. I was led to the van, not as a prisoner, but as someone finally being seen. Mr. Harold followed close, speaking quietly to the officers. Then he turned to Tafari. Still, he said nothing, only opened the back door to his car, and nodded again. The officers looked at each other. Then at the man who had given everything to find a boy who had nothing. They nodded. And they let Tafari go. Into the car, into the unknown. Miss Carver screamed behind them, but her voice no longer had power. As the car pulled away, the boy looked out the window one last time at the park, the fence, the orphanage roof barely visible in the distance. He didn't wave, he didn't cry. He simply held the piece of paper still folded in his pocket, the one that had promised he would be found. Mr. Harold drove in silence. No music. No talking, only the sound of wind outside. But in that silence, something new was being born. Not safety, not comfort, but possibility. And as the city lights faded behind them, the road ahead stretched wide, long and uncertain. Yet Tafari's hands, now resting on his lap, had already begun to move. He was designing again, but this time for something bigger. Something the world would never forget. The mansion stood tall on the edge of the city, where glass towers kissed the clouds and the sky seemed bluer than anywhere Tafari had ever known. But despite its shining floors, endless windows, and rooms filled with things he could not name, Tafari didn't feel small, because Mr. Harold never treated him like a guest. He treated him like a builder. And for the first time, Tafari had a table of his own. It was wide and wooden and smooth. Beside it, a cabinet filled with tools, real ones, not broken pieces stolen from trash. There were screws, wheels, paint, wires, springs, even batteries. Tafari touched them gently, like they were sacred. Mr. Harold gave him time. No schedules. No pressure. Just quiet space to dream. But word of the boy had begun to spread. Not from Mr. Harold, he told no one. But someone had seen them in the park. Someone had followed the van. A whisper reached a journalist, then another. And soon, cameras circled the gates. The boy who built toys from trash. Orphan genius discovered by toy tycoon. From poverty to prototype. But Tafari didn't care for lights or headlines. He didn't build for fame. He built because his hands needed to move. Because his mind could not rest. Because something inside him still believed that joy could be made, even from broken things. And so he built one toy after another, each one better than the last. Robot that could follow light. A car powered by rubber and wind. A bird that flapped its wings with a pull of a string. Mr. Harold watched quietly. His factory, once filled with tired machines and empty souls, now buzzed with new energy. Designers returned. Investors called. Stores reopened. But more than anything, children smiled again, because Tafari's toys were different. They were real. They were made from a heart that had known hunger, silence, and pain, and turned it into wonder. One evening, Tafari stood on a platform. Inside a grand hall, surrounded by men in suits and cameras that flashed like lightning. He wore a simple shirt, his shoes still slightly too big, his fingers holding a prototype, a spinning top made from recycled plastic, powered by breath. He didn't speak. He didn't smile. He simply placed it on the floor, blew once into its tube, and watched it spin across the polished tiles, faster and faster, then glow softly from the light. Stored inside, the room fell silent. And then applause, but Tafari didn't hear it. He was staring at the toy, because it moved like his first truck, the one he had built beneath the dying tree, the one they tried to take from him, the one that saved him. After the event, Mr. Harold walked beside him through the crowd. People tried to talk to Tafari, to shake his hand, to take pictures. But he kept moving, his eyes forward. When they reached the car, Mr. Harold opened the door. Tafari paused, then reached into his pocket and pulled out the old piece of paper. "I will find you." He handed it to Mr. Harold. The man unfolded it slowly. His hand trembled. And for the first time, he whispered, "I already did." Tafari nodded once, then climbed into the car. No lights. No words, just a boy with hands that remembered, and a heart that had never stopped building. Far behind them, the toy still spun, a circle of light born from trash. A gift to the world, from a child it had almost forgotten.